All right, welcome to day 2 of the We the People National Invitational. This is Unit 1 with Saint Richards Episcopal School. My name is Christine Hull and I will be facilitating today. In a moment, I will have the judges introduce themselves, followed by the students, and then we will begin the hearing. Students will deliver a 4-minute prepared statement, followed by 8 minutes of judge questions. My microphone will be muted during the hearing, and I will be holding up the 1 minute and time signs. I suggest that you use gallery view, and I just realized I did not spotlight the students, so I will do that. And at the conclusion of the hearing, judges will give brief feedback to the teams, and then we will conclude. We were so busy chatting that I forgot to do my job. How awful. So I'll let the judges start introducing themselves.
Thank you, Christine. Well, welcome again. My name is Tim Moore from the Center for the Study of the American Constitution at the University of Wisconsin.
And hello, my name is Alan Broadman. I am still a recently retired high school teacher from East Brunswick, New Jersey.
And I'm Glyptis Ann Grider-Jones with the University of Louisville's McConnell Center. Welcome back, and we look forward to seeing you this afternoon, hearing from you this afternoon.
And once again, you are?
I'm Samara Marnick.
I'm Carrington Payne.
I'm Ava Boxdaller.
And I'm Kenna Flurry, and our teacher is Miss Neal.
Well, it's nice to see you again. Let's get down to business right away. Question number 2. I'll read it, and then afterwards you can begin. If man, in a state of nature, be so free, as has been said, if he be absolute Lord of his own person and possessions, equal to the greatest and subject to nobody, why will he part with this freedom? Why will he subject himself to the dominion and control of any other power? How did Locke answer these questions? According to Locke and Thomas Jefferson, what is natural law in a state of nature? Do you agree or disagree with their reasoning? Why or why not? What did Locke mean by the social contract? Why did he think it was necessary? What obligation does the social contract place on the government and on the individual? You may begin.
Individual autonomy. This is the idea that we may live our own lives as we see fit, making our own choices and following our own consciences. This concept came out of the Enlightenment period, and we can thank both John Locke and Thomas Jefferson for recognizing it. As Locke stated, if mankind is the lord of his own person and property, why should he part with his freedom or subject himself to the control of another? Locke and Jefferson answered that question in the same way, in order to secure his life, liberty, and property.
Although the natural law concept existed before Locke, his writings about the topic were a strong influence on the founders. It is a theory that man's most natural state is perfect freedom, but that perfect freedom does not guarantee the protection of fundamental rights. For this reason, governments are formed. In 2 treatises, Locke states men living together according to reason, without a common superior on earth, with authority to judge between them, is properly the state of nature. Thomas Jefferson's state of nature has a bit more structure. He writes, the happiest state for human is one that seeks a middle ground between what is savage and what is refined. Both agree that in a pure state of nature, it is not practical. Locke points out that in a pure state, people might pursue their own self-interest and abuse the rights of others. Bullies might pick on the weak, and the weak might band together to oppose the strong. It would be like a class of 3rd graders without a teacher. Having a government that protects rights while limiting some of our freedom is the best way to protect all people in a society.
Locke's philosophy was that people are born with the rights of life, liberty, and property, but that these are not safe in a natural state. That's why social contracts are formed. According to Locke, a social contract is an agreement among people to create a government whose job is to protect their natural rights. The people give up living in a state of nature, and the government agrees to protect their life, liberty, and property. Without this, many bad things could happen. For example, people might violently grab power and take away rights just because they can. This is the case in South Sudan today. There could be communities where people randomly decide what the law is and kill or steal without punishment or with vigilante justice. The Mayflower Compact was an early example of a social contract because the Mayflower passengers landed in territory that was not defined by their legal charter They worried about what might happen in a state of nature. Before getting off the boat, they pledged to combine ourselves together in a civil body politic for a better ordering and preservation.
A social contract requires the individual to follow laws and generally obey the government. The government is also obligated to follow the law and protect and keep the citizens' natural rights. In the United States, our most important social contract is the U.S. Constitution. In it, we the people established a framework for government. This framework is designed to prevent abuse of power by the government. The Bill of Rights lists specific rights of the people and says the government cannot deprive people of life, liberty, or property without giving them due process of law. As part of the social contract, people are expected to live together in peace. We are expected to vote in elections and serve on juries when called. In other words, there's an obligation to be good citizens.
At our school, we have an affirmation of honor that we recite daily. In it, we accept personal responsibility for our behavior and agree to be open to the diverse world in which we live. This is our school's version of a social contract. It is a daily reminder that with individual autonomy comes great responsibility. We are ready for your questions.
Okay. So I'd like to explore this idea of government and rights protection. And as you noted and as Locke noted, the purpose of government is the protection of our rights, in particular our natural rights, but rights overall. So when, however, should government be able to limit my rights?
I think that the government should only be able to limit your rights in like emergency situations, because if you realized during the time we're in right now with COVID-19 and all that, the government has been limiting our rights more, I guess, because some people can argue that with mask mandates and the possibility of vaccine mandates, that they are kind of taking away your one of your natural rights of liberty.
I agree. I think that our rights can be limited, obviously, in this time with COVID and the pandemic. But I think that in a way, our rights are already limited. I mean, if you're using your rights, like using too much power or like going over your rights, there's ways that the government can check those rights, like maybe being arrested or fined. And I think there's already some limits on our rights.
And while we were saying that having like a mask mandate could limit your rights, it's also protecting you because when you wear a mask, there's a less likely percent of you getting COVID and or spreading it. So while it technically is limiting your rights, it's also protecting you, which is better in the common good, in the whole scheme of things.
Do you think there's any states of nature right now anywhere?
Yes. Okay. Yes, I do think that there are some places that are a state of nature right now. Like I mentioned in the speech, South Sudan, as of now, seems to be a little bit like, well, not a little bit. It just seems to be like a state of nature with all the violence, and there's really like people. It's pretty much just like a free for all.
How about if I decide that I am going to go to way southern Indiana and live on a hilltop with no electricity and no roads? Have I declared myself independent of the social contract? Am I in a state of nature then?
I would consider that to not be in a state of nature, even though that you're living on your own, disconnected from society. You're still on American soil, so you're still you're still a citizen, and you're still a part of the social contract.
I think that you. Go ahead, Kendall.
So I would agree with her to a sense. I'd say one major thing I think that kind of defines our social contract is us voting. So I think if it would kind of, if you were voting, I would say you would still be considered inside the social contract because you are voting and you're contributing. I would say if you're not voting or not doing anything of that manner, I would say it would be debatable whether you still were a part of like our society.
Somebody else had a thought there?
Yeah, I was just saying, like, if you're still voting, like Kendall said, or if you're still like doing things to be a part of the society, then of course you're not living in a state of nature. But I guess you could argue that if you're not living by a social contract or the Constitution or anything like that, and you're just on your own, then you're definitely in a state of nature, even if you are on American soil.
Okay, thank you.
What should people have the right to do if they think the government is not serving the purpose for which it was designed? What should they have the right to do?
The people should have the right to contest the government. So let's say, I'm going to use a classroom example. Let's say there's a class of third graders and they say their teacher's not doing a well enough job teaching them. They could go to the principal and say, you know, I don't think this teacher is a good enough teacher. This person is not doing their job as a teacher. Now, if you put that in America's standpoint, I could, or like a group of people in Indiana could go to the president and say, listen, I don't think our governor is doing a good enough job. And I don't really know what he could do about that, but we could also just not vote this person into office next term.
I agree with Kendall. Sorry. I agree with Kendall. Also, you could, if you thought that like the president or some person in power, like a part of the government, wasn't doing a well enough job, you could write a letter to the Supreme Court or something like that, or you could protest or post about it on social media. Even if you don't have that big of a platform, you'd still be getting people's attention.
I think protesting is obviously something that people do a lot today, but I think it's definitely very limited in our government. I mean, if you look at the protests on the Capitol or like the Black Lives Matter protests, there was obviously a lot of people disagreeing with what the protests were about and a lot of arguing over it. And I just think that protesting definitely should be something that we should be able to use more to our advantage if we don't like something about the government, rather than have the government fight us on it.
So what's your take on a right to revolt? What do you think of that as an option?
I think that the right to revolt, like when I think of that, I think about like starting a revolution. And I kind of disagree with that because that like involves violence. So what I think is that since in our First Amendment right, we have the right to protest. So I think it should stay in the part of protesting and not necessarily a revolt, which could lead to violence and people dying. So like I said before, I think it should stay to protesting and like peacefully.
Okay, what about the American Revolution then? You handed that one right to me. Were the founders off base in revolting in the American Revolution?
Well, I don't think that they were necessarily off base in revolting in the American Revolution, because I agree with what Carrington is saying, but at the same time, there are some extreme circumstances where a revolt is necessary.
I completely agree. I think there's some situations just where you need to be able to revolt or riot. And obviously, if you're going to riot, you're kind of signing yourself up for something like violent that could happen. But I think that it's a necessary thing that if you're in an extreme situation, you might just need to have your voice heard.
Okay. This time it was me. Okay.
This time it wasn't Tim. Finally, 2 days. It took 2 days.
Oh boy. All right.
Well, I'll start out if that's okay. I think there's this phrase that I think that kind of resonates through the whole 15 minutes that we spent. Very early in your 4-minute presentation, you said perfect freedom is risky, which means that the social contract may be risky as well. And I've appreciated. We're pushing you around on this idea of, do you reform the system or do you burn it down? That's a hard question. That's a very, very hard question. And you did a good job of trying to sort through those. And don't worry about it, Carrington. I couldn't resist when you handed that. I was just sitting right there. Okay, what about our country? Holy cow! And as you well know, there were some people that were not willing to buy the argument that there was a long train of abuses. So that phrase for Jefferson is really troublesome because we've always tried to sort out how far, and is violence, and you wrestle with that. Is violence acceptable? Well, yeah, maybe, but man. So I've appreciated you sharing your thoughts, and those are hard thoughts to parse out, and there's a lot of gray area in this. So I appreciated that, and I'll defer further comments to my colleagues. But it's been wonderful to meet you and spend these last 2 days with you a little bit.
I also agree. I've enjoyed the time today and yesterday. So first, we really want to thank you for the effort and the hard work you all put in to get here. Really enjoyed hearing the Mayflower Compact reference.
Yes.
I thought that was very appropriate and historical, and a good use there, and pulling from that. Also really liked how you used the example of the third grade classroom. Relatable, and really helped you all think and explore those ideas, and in the response segueing from, okay, third grade classroom, but let's apply it into the context of U.S. governance. So really like how seeing how you all are thinking and reasoning through examples, and as you're learning more about U.S. governance in general, applying. So really enjoyed seeing that, and encourage you just to keep pushing that forward as you learn more. And again, thinking of the contemporary, I enjoy the contemporary examples, that South Sudan reference, and just thank you for your time. Just keep, the more you learn, the more examples you have, just continue to use and show us everything you know. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. As a teacher who also did Model UN at my school, when you bring in other nations' constitutions and situations, I very much enjoy that comparison. So hearing South Sudan was good. Hearing that social media provides you a voice. We had not had someone go there yet. Obviously you talked about protests and so forth, but I thought the social media was a good example. I was going to push you more about when is violence then appropriate, or is it ever appropriate? And I think we would have had a very interesting discussion, because that's what we had. We had a conversation about this, and that's what this always should be. So again, thank you very much, guys, for your efforts both days. So thank you.
Good luck.
Yep.